Hello everyone. I have been given access to a chunk of new upcoming ships again, so it's time to do the first impressions and the previews. As you can see, matchmaking, mostly tier 10s, 3 tier 9s, everyone else tier 10s. A lot of radar on the enemy team as usual, and I will be showcasing the Harugumo, the upcoming tier 10 IJN gunboat. It is the natural follow-up of the Akizuki. You go from the Akizuki to the Kitakaze to the Harugumo. This is the tier 10 version. And I'm pushing right into the cap. I am in a division though, and so I do know that I will at least have some support here. Now the Harugumo sits at a pretty damn beefy 25.6k health. If you add survivability expert, which I of course highly recommend on all destroyers, you have 29.1k health, which is quite juicy. The armor is 90mm pretty much across the ship. You have 30mm superstructure and turrets, but overall though it fluctuates between 13 and 19. So honestly, don't expect to bounce or shatter any shells at all. That's simply not going to happen, so don't expect it. And it has no convenient 50mm strip of armor like the Kaba has, so any hits you take, expect them to be raw damage, as you can see quite easily here. This is actually quite rough, because this ship is massive. It's longer than all its competition. It even beats the Z52, the Grossovoy, the Kaba. It's in size. It's larger than all of them. And if you aren't aware, being a massive DD is certainly not a positive thing in World of Warships, especially when you have no armor. Especially when you're as clumsy as this thing is as well. Concealment wise, the concealment is pretty iffy. Considering you're supposed to be a DD, a gunboat, so to say, which means of course you want to push capture points as I did there, and you want to try to secure them for your team. With the full build, stealth module, concealment expert and camo, you can reach 6.2 kilometers of sea concealment, 4.2 km by air. So naturally this means that all your tier 10 competition will outspot you, with the exception of the Kaba. I hate that I have to add that. Kaba doesn't even feel like a destroyer, it's more like a light cruiser. Anyway, even the Z52, which I just fought, will outspot you, and he has a 6.1 km conceal. It might not sound like a big deal now, until you take into account some of the things I mentioned, which is of course the huge size and the maneuverability, which I will get into right now. The Harugumo is the slowest tier 10 DD. It does 37.5 knots with a speed flag. Even the gearing does 37.8 with a speed flag. And I mean, speed boost does alleviate the problem a bit, but it's not like the competition doesn't have access to speed boost as well. I mean, Yu Yang with the flag does 38.3, Z52 does 39.4. So no matter how you twist and turn it, you are the slowest tier 10 destroyer. And then of course you have things, Shima and Grossovoy, they easily go over 40 knots, 41 something, and the Kaba of course does 45 with flag, which is it's completely in its own scale in that sense. Another issue this ship does struggle with is the acceleration. It very much suffers from the Seattle syndrome, which means it's incredibly sluggish to move from a standstill. This actually became so frustrating to me that I eventually slotted the acceleration module, and that was after I ate the torpedo in the smoke. Even though I spotted the torpedo a mile away, I knew it was coming. I couldn't dodge it because the acceleration was simply not enough. So the ship is still slow to accelerate, but it handles significantly better. This gameplay here is with the acceleration module, which makes it a lot more comfortable to play. The rudder shift is quite sluggish, 5.5 seconds. Once again, the worst of the pack, with the exception being the Kaba. Worst of the pack in maneuverability is something you're gonna hear a lot, because this thing pretty much hits all the bases at being worst at stuff. The turning circle is probably the best example of this you can imagine. This ship takes 800, look at this turn, 830 meter turning circle. Even the Kaba only has a 760 meter turning circle. Grossovoy, Z52, they are like 720 and 700 meters respectively. So this is that massive size I mentioned early on. This is the massive size coming into play. And I have to say, even then I feel like an 830 meter turning circle seems a bit ridiculous for a destroyer. even the Conqueror turns in 820. So I can literally, without exaggerating in any way, say that this turning circle is worse than the turning circle of a tier 10 battleship. That is kind of ridiculous. Now, obviously this combination of its huge size, lack of armor, slowest speed, worst turning circle, means that doing what I'm doing here, aka gunboating in the open, is honestly really risky. And there are rare occasions where I actually do it and feel like I can get away with it. The Kaba, for example, gets away with doing this because, well, it's got that additional armor, it's got that sheer speed. The Harugumo has neither of those things, and it's bigger and it's clumsier. So obviously it does limit the way you can play this ship quite a bit. This Friedrich the Gross is so occupied with the guys on his flank, luckily, that I'm able to deal damage, and his teammates have been forced so far back that I'm kinda okay here. I do wonder if I do want to pick up priority target on the ship though, because it would be useful when you're kind of tunnel visioned and you're trying to focus down someone to know if you're being focus fired. Luckily though, it seems that they are not shooting me as of right now. A very rare treat for me. Now, the AA on the ship is also surprisingly pathetic. After the recent AA pack releases from Wargaming, I would have expected the tier 10 follow-up of the Akizuki to have something in the form of AA. But I was honestly quite let down here. The long range aura on the Harugumo deals 104 DPS at 5 km, and the two mid-range auras at 3.5 and 3.1 deal 66 and 29. At tier 10, without defensive AA, that's not really that impressive. I've tried the power of this AA with just slotting the range upgrade, because, well, it's kind of hard to slot anything else since you don't have the captain perks for it, and it has been laughably weak. I have a clip from my stream. I highlighted this clip just because it serves as such a good example. Two tier 8 Lexington bombers sit inside my AA, and they sit inside the range of all my AA, meaning both my short and mid range, because with the module they are like 3 point something and 4.2 km, and they pretty much sit inside the range of all my auras for 50 seconds. And well, against tier 8 bombers, 50 seconds of pure AA and the struggling I had to just shoot them down was obviously ridiculous. So this means that I'll post it below in the comments. This of course means that unless you heavily spec into AA with things like manual AA, you are extremely vulnerable to carriers. The massive turning circle, the long size, and no defensive AA means that you're pretty much a dream target for any carrier that knows how to manual drop torpedoes. I mean, even bombs have a good chance of hitting you because of your size. So with no way to defend yourself besides hoping you'll kill the enemy planes before they blap you, it's gonna be a pretty awkward experience. Because, well, the base AA values, they're simply not there. Now, honestly, I've been wondering if maybe they couldn't give at least the players the option to slot defensive AA. Maybe they could replace give you the option of replacing torpedo boost with it or replacing speed boost with it, so it would be a trade-off. But not having access to it at all when there's so much competition that does have access to it, and you kind of need it the most out of everyone because of your sluggishness. Oh, hello there, Mr. Minotaur. Shooting a bit of... You can see though, even at this distance, I saw him reversing and I shot, and he had time to accelerate and dodge my shells before they landed. And this is kind of part of the reason why long-range gunboat builds, they're gonna be pretty iffy. I will try it, but I have very low expectations. Now, moving on. The torpedoes. The Harugumo has the choice between two sets of torps. 12 km range, 12 kilometer range Type 93 Mod 3 torps, and the 8 km F3s. Now, with the current radar spam meta, for example, that Minotaur there is a radar Minotaur, which is why I can't push into this cap at all. I have a Des Moines on my right, radar Minotaur on my left, and a potential Shimakaze in there. Yeah, you don't really want to go within 8 kilometer range of anything. So, ultimately, I haven't really bothered with the F3 torps at all. Because, well, with the ship size and the clumsiness and all of these things, being caught in radar range is kind of like a one-way trip to the port with this ship. Now, you have, as you can see, one sextuple launcher. With torpedo reload, you are able to have 12 torps in the water at the same time, with a very large cooldown, of course. The torpedo reload booster is actually quite important because your torpedo reload speed is very slow. It's 171 seconds on these Type 93s, which is almost 3 minutes. The F3s reload like 14 seconds faster, but honestly, when the reload is that long, that's not a very impressive difference. And as I see, I'm probably gonna land a torp. I'm trying to get as much damage in on this Yamato as possible, because a full HP Yamato could wreak a lot of havoc on my team. Still though, obviously with the almost 3 minute reload time on these torps, it's obvious Wargaming does not want you to play this ship as a torp boat in any way. And trying to do so would be greatly limiting your effectiveness. Now, the main attractiveness of this ship, the main attractiveness which I haven't touched upon yet, is obviously what you're seeing right now. The firepower. This is what it gives up all these other stats for. The guns. 10 100mm guns split into 5 turrets across the ship. With a blisteringly fast reload of 2.6 seconds with the 3 million reload module. And honestly, the sheer amount of shells this thing can spew out is very impressive. I mean, you are basically a small Atlanta at tier 10. The initial shell velocity is 1000 meters per second, which I've seen people go really crazy about. Oh my god, 1000 meters per second shell velocity. But that's exactly the same that the Akizuki has. That's not nothing new. That's exactly what Akizuki has had all this time. And as everyone should know by now, small caliber equals small shells, which equals light shells, which means these shells lose velocity very quickly in the air, which you have obviously seen, for example, against the Minotaur and anyone trying to kite away. The shell, 10-second travel time, you can see they're very fast at the start and then they lose a lot of velocity and they drop from the sky. And this is like the perfect example of why these guns aren't as amazing as people might think. Also, the caliber being only 100mm means that the base HE pen, when you divide 100 by 6, is 16.66. Now, considering most of your DD competition sails around with 19mm of armor, this means that IFHE is, just like on the Akizuki, practically mandatory. Even more so on the ship, because, well, you can't give up IFHE. That's 4 captain points that are practically reserved for IFHE. There are no other options. If you don't pick IFHE, any tier 10 destroyer like a Gearing or Yu Yang, all they need to do is angle against your AP, sit nose in, and they will kill you, because you can't deal any damage to them. So, very clear-cut choices there. The base fire chance is also only 5%. If you add IFHE, that's 1% gone, so you get sitting at 4% fire chance. With flags, you boost it to 5, with Demo Expert you can boost it to 7, which I of course highly recommend. I mean, going from 5% to 7% fire chance is a significant upgrade and probably some of the best use you can get of the 3 captain perk points right there. Obviously, it's still not a very impressive value, because tier 10 hulls have fire resistance, which cuts this fire chance in half. But with the sheer volume, once again, of shells that you can pump out, especially with AR kicking in and all of this, you do start a pretty decent amount of fires. You're not going to be anything amazing at it, but if you do focus a target, they will eventually be burning. The AP is quite nice. As you saw me shoot the Yamato a bit there, it's quite nice against those juicy flat broadsides. Battleship, cruisers, destroyers, all of them can arm your AP quite easily. Especially American light cruisers have been a lot of fun to kill with this thing when they give broadside. Hitting them for 3 to 4k broadside AP has been, especially with the 2.6 second reload, has been quite disgusting. Ultimately though, the firing angles are also quite decent. They're not amazing, but they're decent. But most of the time when you face enemy DDs, you'll be turning away to kite regardless. Because, well, you don't want to push into a situation where you're forced to torpedo a bit. And you really don't want the enemy fleet shooting you, because, well, once again, huge size, clumsiness, pushing into a situation where the enemy team can shoot you is always going to be very punishing for you. this Minotaur trying to kill my buddy, so I focus him down since my buddy had his guns turned the other way. This game is actually very, very close if you haven't noticed. We're still down on points, and I'm trying to secure this cap and hunt down the Shimakaze. Since I'm spotted, I know he's somewhere nearby. The Torps came from the north, it might be him there. I really don't know, since, well, I don't have RPF on this captain, which normally I really like. Oh, the ship is so clumsy. Now, I normally really like RPF on the on DDs, but you have so many points you must have. You must have Concealment Expert to get the Concealment down to 6.2, so you can at least contest capture points. You must have IFHE, otherwise you deal no damage. So that's your pretty much your 14-point captain tied up right there. So there are options, but if you want to change for any sort of exotic build on this ship, you have to give up so much. Now, what are my conclusions on this ship? Well, I will be testing some slight range builds today, like picking up AFT, maybe slapping the range mod on it. I'll be testing that stuff on my stream today, seeing if any sort of open water gunboat gameplay has any sort of viability. But honestly, because of all the downsides I mentioned, I kinda doubt it. I'll also try some full AA builds in the training room, see how well we do against carriers, see if we can get any sort of power out of this AA. The problem is of course the lack of defensive AA and the weak base values. Do I like the ship? Initially, I actually quite hated it, but once I slotted the acceleration module on, it became a lot more tolerable. It's still quite cumbersome to play. Obviously, of course, the current meta doesn't exactly help matters. It's very hostile to DDs. We have the American campaign, which encourages American cruiser and American carrier gameplay. The recently released Kronstadt. They recently buffed the Moskva. They just released the American light cruiser line. All of this promotes additional radar cruiser gameplay, and when you play the ship, which relies on sitting still in smokes and shooting because it can't shoot in the open, having a lot of radar around doesn't exactly make it particularly enjoyable. Honestly, at this point I need to play it a bit more before I can draw some final conclusions. As of right now though, I think the downsides of the ship might be a tad too aggressive. Like, does it really need to have an 830 meter turning circle? Yes, I know you want to make it clumsy to make up for the firepower, but 830 meter, like a Conqueror outturns me, it seems a bit extreme. It seems a bit insane. Ultimately though, this game, we do manage to turn it around, and with 1 minute 30 they kill off the Hindenburg, and this game does end up in a win, which is actually 195k damage win. I got 2 caps, 4 kills. Of course I get no achievements because this is a test ship, so once again no achievements. Pretty impressive 14 fires, but then again 665 shell hits, so 14 fires maybe isn't that amazing after all. Team score wise, 2.7k base, which is nice, and actually managing to squeeze out the win out of this game is also satisfying, especially against a lot of radars and a map that in general kinda iffy map. Detailed report wise though, this is where it gets pretty damn amusing. Well, 50k damage upon your spotting, potential damage 1.3 because I did shoot in the open a fair bit and dodge torps and so forth. But the real amusing thing is of course main battery. Shells fired, 1258 HE shells and 228 AP shells. If there's any ribbon missions, having this ship will make them a lot easier, because that's an absolutely absurd amount of shells fired. 1.5k shells fired this game. I would have gotten a Witherer out of the fires and flooding, but once again, no such achievement. Worth noting though, of course, with all the consumables, the costs can get pretty extreme, especially if you're not running premium. Even this game would have barely given me, without premium, it would have barely given me 77k credits. And this was honestly pretty much a carry game. So yeah, paying 90k for consumables on top of the 180k service price, and the ammo price of course, it does get pretty expensive. Still though, anyone who's played tier 10 is probably used to this by now. Anyway, let me show you guys my recommended build for the ship. Right, as usual, let me show you guys my recommended build for the ship. First of all, Type 93 torps. Even with that insane reload time, it's still not worth going for the 8 km torps in my opinion. Too much radar, too many threats, and you don't really want to get caught next to the enemy in this ship. Consumable wise, premium smoke and premium damage con are probably my 2 recommended things. After that, follow it up with speed boost and torpedo reload booster. Both are good, both are quite useful. It's sluggish, so you really want the speed. The torp reload is very long, so the booster gives you a lot of additional DPM, but neither is quite as important as the repair and the smoke. Upgrade wise, turret and torpedo tube survivability, engine survivability. You could go for the speed boost module as well, of course, but I prefer the engine one. AA range and acceleration module. I mentioned this for obvious reasons. The thing is so clumsy. Concealment, so you actually are able to close the distance with the enemy DDs, and more firepower, since that's your bread and butter. Captain perks wise, preventive maintenance, you got a lot of breakable modules. I've kind of been wondering if I want to maybe go priority target to help deal with how many people are shooting me, but I've come to the conclusion that whenever you're spotted, everyone wants to shoot you anyway. Priority target does give you some useful information when you engage a DD on a flank where the enemy hasn't been scouted though, because depending on how many people target you, it tells you how many people are on that flank, which can be very useful information. Still though, as of right now, I'm running preventive maintenance, followed by last stand, followed by survivability expert, followed by concealment expert. After that, I would absolutely take IFHE, follow it up with adrenaline rush, and then for the last 3-pointer, put it into demolition expert. Since the buff from 5% to 7% fire chance is very significant, especially since, well, your reload is so rapid and your fire chance is so low, so this kind of bonus is really significant. And let's see what else. I mean, this is the base build I recommend. If you queue with a carrier, well, you have to invest points. I don't really know if you want to queue with a carrier with this thing. You have to invest points in things like manual fire control. The biggest issue with the Harugumo, kind of like with the Akizuki, is that you want so many perks on this. If I could choose, I would want BFD to increase my AA. I would want AFT for the gun range and the AA range. I would love to have vigilance for faster warning, since I'm so clumsy. It's hard to dodge those torpedoes. Like, there's a lot of perks you really want, but the ones that I've chosen right now are tried and tested things that seem to work very, very well. Flag wise, actually let me show you guys the camo. Here you have the camo on the ship, which is actually really good looking. I do love both the camos. This is one color scheme, and then let me show you guys the other color scheme. This one, I think both of them actually look quite good. In fact, I do love the looks of the ship. It's a sleek looking, really nice looking ship. The issues is, of course, well, the size and the clumsiness. Signal wise, fire chance flags are great. AA flags are fantastic. Speed flag, well, you're already the slowest tier 10 DD. You kind of want to compensate by slapping this flag on. Demolition flag, and besides that, detonation flag, sorry, not demolition. And besides that, I just go economic flags. But overall, I mean, there's no convenient 50mm plating here to protect you. You are a big ship. You can see when you switch from the Harugumo to the Kaba, you can see that the camera zooms in a bit because it's smaller in size. And then you go to the Harugumo, and you note how the camera has to go back a bit. That's because the Harugumo is so damn huge. It is a massive DD. And as of right now, I don't really know, man. It's a pretty cumbersome experience. It can be fun, it can be really fun when you really get to use your guns, but man, when you're caught eating torps and stuff because you struggle with this kind of a turning circle, 830. And just to show you guys that I wasn't joking when I said that I can actually say that this turns worse than a battleship, turning circle, 830 meters. Let me select the Conqueror. Where is my Conqueror? Turning circle, 820 meters. IJN Destroyer versus Royal Navy battleship. Yeah, I think they went a bit too extreme with that Harugumo turning circle. Anyway, that was my initial impressions on the ship. I hope you guys enjoyed it.